slowly stepped out into the darkness on a dirt trail that angled away from the Chinese tower. Back in the shadows, he stopped and watched his small kiosk for a moment. The little store carried tourist trinkets, newspapers, and candy, insignificant items to most, but to Mesut, they were his life. It had become his ritual for the past 6 months. Lock up and watch. He had come to Munich in the mid-70s and worked hard in the BMW factory to save money, even sent some home to his parents in Turkey. But the factory was not his dream, only the means to reach it. He wanted to own a store. When the owner of the small kiosk in the English Gardens was forced to sell, driven from business by thieving Russian gangs, Mesut jumped at his dream. He would deal with the Russian punks in his own way. In the distance, under lights strung through the trees, 20 or more men sat on wooden benches nursing the last of their beers. An anxious proprietor hovered over them now, scooping up each empty mug and running them back to another man in the tiny imbis. Satisfied that his kiosk would be safe, Mesut turned and waddled down the path. It was a long walk in the darkness to his home. He avoided the Monopterus temple and the drug addicts who made it their home by day and passed out there on warm nights. But by now they would be off in some other world he did not understand. He had become more cautious in the last week with the shooting deaths of 2 foreigners in the gardens. Mesut headed south through a patch of beech trees, their heavy canopies swaying with a slight breeze. He moved with a fluid motion, for a man his size, toward the outer edge of the large city park. He crossed a tiny brook and then turned left onto an even smaller path that wound through a stand of pines. He was in total darkness now, navigating on instinct. He traveled the same path each night, so he could do it without thinking. When he exited the pines, there was a small opening, a field dotted with huge oaks. He stopped for a moment and scanned the outer edge that was lit by old metal light posts along a sidewalk that skirted an access road. Tourists used the road often in the summer, but it was mainly for bicycles and the park's crew. The lights reached out into the field only a short distance. He started off again. As he reached the cobblestone sidewalk, his heels clicking, echoing down the narrow lane with each step, he felt more at ease. It was only a short walk now before he would turn up a side street and stroll the final 4 blocks to his small second-floor apartment. Both of his boys had moved out. One to Stuttgart to work in a Mercedes factory, and the other to Frankfurt to work as a ticket agent for Turkish Air. Only his wife remained, waiting impatiently for his return each evening. The wind picked up, blowing leaves across the damp, dewy grass. There was a slight whimper to his right, and he stopped dead in his tracks. On the outer edge of the light, he could just make out the image of a man on top of a woman, pumping her with great force as she begged him for more. He shook his head and continued on. After a block, he stopped abruptly alongside a towering old oak and looked in both directions. He thought he'd heard someone behind him. The shooter smirked as he watched the Turk from his black Mercedes in a parking lot across from the English Gardens. He lowered the passenger window with a quiet whir and let the cool fall air envelop him. He loved the fall. There was something pure about all the dying leaves falling softly to the ground, the naked trees waiting for their own metamorphosis in the spring. He became more serious as he raised the gun against his cheek and propped the stock out the window. Humans were so easy, so predictable. It was a simple shot, he reassured himself, 100 meters, perhaps, nothing more. He brought the scope to his eye, and the man's full upper torso, although not in perfect view, filled the optic lens. He centered the red dot against the side of the man's gray wool jacket.